My name is Eric Patterson. I'm Executive Vice President of the Religious Freedom Institute in Washington, D.C., and this is RFI's 3 Questions on Ukraine video series. Our mission at RFI is to secure religious freedom for everyone, everywhere around the world. My guest today is Father Andriy Zelenskyy, the Chief of Chaplains of the Ukrainian Catholic Church in Ukraine. Father Andriy, welcome.
Greetings, nice to meet you here. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, I've read some of your interviews and seen some of your other interviews, and I'd like to just get right to your service, please. Would you tell us about your service as a military chaplain leader, and how that's changed since February 24th, now that we're at May 3rd, 2022?
Well, it's one of the best, as I usually say, vocations in the world to be a military chaplain, one of the best vocations in the church, to be able to serve those who serve their homeland, who serve their people. And the change actually for us, for the Ukrainians, didn't happen on, not that much happened on February 24th. We've been trying to defend our country from the Russian aggression since 2014. Unfortunately, in those days, 8 years ago, the world chose not to notice what was going on in the eastern borders of our country, of Ukraine, thinking that it will pass, that keeping quiet will help to somehow solve the problem. But as this time we can see, but as this issue demonstrates, not quite so, which always all of our decisions, since we as human beings, free beings, so all of our decisions have certain moral consequences, and of course have certain consequences in general, and of this not desiring, or refusing to notice what was going on in Ukraine in 2014 and to name it loudly what it was, well, brought us to February 24th. And February 24th was for us, it's like I usually say that before February 24th, 2022, we lived in 2 different concepts of Ukraine. In the eastern part, there was a war zone. There were Russian tanks, there were Russian mercenaries, and there was fight. We've been losing our men and women for 8 years. During the last 8 years, Ukraine lost around 14,000 civilians and more than 4,000 military. But still, when you go, and I did it, I spent 4 years in that area. So you go there, you see the war, you see the atrocities, you see people being killed and dying. Then you can go back to Kyiv, Lviv, Odessa, or any other Ukrainian cities where life was flowing normally, where people were doing their work, their jobs, going to their jobs, getting married, and stuff like this. So there was always a feeling that, okay, there is a front line, but then there is also a safe place. And all this is still your country, your homeland. So because homeland or country is not only a territory on the map, it's the feeling of our, let's say, vision of reality. We carry it with us. It's in our brain and in our heart. So February 24th destroyed that model of reality for all of us, for all of the Ukrainians. There is still not a safe place in our country. There is no city or town where you can go to have sort of a rehabilitation from the war scenes. Of course, there are those territories where the fights are more intense, like the cities of Mariupol, Kharkiv, Chernihiv. But only a month ago here in Kyiv, right now talking from Kyiv downtown, and the main street, was as empty as like in horror movies. Nobody. You get out, there's only you and the wind and nothing else, because there are fights just around the city, and there's so many shells and rockets that actually hit the buildings, the civilians. So in any event, starting February 24th, 2022, war for Ukrainians became something I would call it total. It's everywhere. It's penetrating our minds and our hearts. You can find a safe place. You can escape it. So that's very important feeling that we all care of us. You can't just escape if you are in Ukraine. Almost all of it, like the whole territory of the country, it's a huge country. It's the biggest in terms of territory in Europe. Like all of the big cities, they were already hit by the rockets. 1,300 rockets were shot on the cities of Ukraine. So I remember this impression that I discovered the early morning, February 24th, staying here in Kiev, downtown. For me, the city of Kiev was always a city, or I would say, it was maybe in the best way transmitting this concept of peace, no? Because since I've seen already war for so long, in such different forms, to even imagine that there could be bombs dropped, rocket and the civil houses shelled in the city of Kiev, which once again for me was one of the most peaceful cities in the world. This was unthinkable. It's like something that really tears apart your soul. It's very, very, very violent experience. No, there's like all your concept of peace, well-being, of living in order, of experiencing your freedom, realizing your vocation, was all suddenly destroyed by bombs that were dropped on Kiev and so many other cities. Just the first morning of this war. I just have to add that it never stopped. So there was not a day during all this whole period, there was not a day when the Ukrainian cities were not shelled by the rockets. It's impossible. It's simply unthinkable. But this, of course, generates this feeling that you are a human being, no matter who you are, because you can be a professor at the university, you can be a priest, you can be a military chaplain, not just the military, but you're a simple human being standing in front of a tremendous violence which you can't deal with by yourself. You can't deal with this alone. Something that you were reading books because the level of violence and the machines that are being used, the weapon that is being exploited, well, it sends us back in our memory to World War II. There was nothing like this in Europe since those days. And once again, because we Ukrainians used to perceive Ukraine as the land of peace. So we were born after World War II. And I should also mention that at the beginning of the 20th century, this land suffered a lot, very much. Like first World War I here, then the artificial famine, so organized by the Russians, by the Bolsheviks, then World War II. So it just, then concentration camps, because the Ukrainians were always fighting. It just millions of people, millions of human beings, millions of destinies, dreams, works, vocations, all of this was destroyed just by violence. So we, the generations that were born in Ukraine afterwards, we were thinking of ourselves as the country of peace, the land of peace. What we see nowadays is completely unthinkable for us. And even to a person like me who spent 4 years in the war zone in the eastern part of the country, it's difficult to imagine that the whole of our country is suffering these scars. Now, this cruelty generates a number of questions. It's not only for the Ukrainians, but for all civilized people. Like, we should ask ourselves, how come? How come this cruelty is possible in the 21st century, Europe? We're in Europe, 21st century. Because we thought that we've taken care about our world, that everything is more or less in its own place. So some minor conflicts, but we can deal with them as well. But here we see something completely different. So many examples of completely unexplained cruelty and violence. I call this war the most absurd war in the modern history. Why? Because it has not even a single real reason. Even at the Kremlin, they've already offered 6 different reasons, interchanging. They either trying to stop NATO, or they're trying to denazify. This was like that's one of the most I don't know, because I always want to laugh when I hear this word, because if you are here in this reality, you think, I mean, how come that we can seriously speak about this in the 21st century on the international level? Nazis in Ukraine, I mean, just like, well, you have to live here to understand why this emotional reaction, because it so much doesn't correspond with the reality. But this also generates another question: how we, the people, the citizens, the civilized citizens of the 21st century, can easily become trapped by illusions generated by media, generated by propaganda. Well, the country of 140 million, I mean, Russia. And if you take a look, because there were some opinions in Europe in the early stages of the war, that it's only Putin responsible. He's responsible for the beginning, definitely so. But he has 80% support of his population, at least more or less 70 to 80%. It's something else. It's about our injured humanity, wounded humanity, the humanity that due to some propaganda is ready to fight with such violence in the unprovoked, illegitimate war against people who never said they want to fight, they want to kill. I mean, it's one of the most peaceful nations in Europe, without exaggeration. I mean Ukrainians. So this kind of raises a number of very serious questions, especially to us, the people of faith, who, by our vocation, must feel ourselves dedicated to seeking the truth, to following the truth, to preaching the truth. So maybe we should become like more let's say, more careful about our opinions of what is true and what is not. Maybe we should go back to our vocation, to seek the truth. And the central word is properly this verb, to seek the truth. Maybe this is possible because we got tired of seeking the truth, and because we decided we can construct it by the means that we can afford ourselves nowadays. So this is a challenge. Once again, it's not so much a political or economical. This war is not about NATO expansion. It's not about any ethnic, religious, or any other conflict. It has much deeper roots. And the sooner we understand it, the sooner we realize it, maybe the sooner we find the truth, the faster we become liberated. This is what our Savior promised to us. No, seek the truth, and the truth will set you free. So that's exactly what we need nowadays. We need freedom from pain, from violence, from unthinkable surrender before the propaganda offered to us by some political forces.
You know, Father Andriy, on this point, later this week, I'm publishing an op-ed on this point you're making, that the level of propaganda that's going on, not just in Russia, but around the world, is poorly understood in the West. In the West, there are Western leaders going to Kiev for photo ops with President Zelenskyy now. There's a lot of the news that we're seeing in the West, which I think is actually quite accurate when it comes to what's going on the ground, shows Russian aggression and things. But in India, in Brazil, especially in China, in Indonesia, in Tehran, all around the world, this is being reported actually quite differently, as you've mentioned. In part, the Chinese keep saying it's just a minor special military operation, and they're broadcasting that message, the same message that Moscow is broadcasting. In other places, they're saying, well, maybe the Ukrainians brought this on themselves due to wanting to be westward facing towards the EU and NATO. There's messages that say, well, maybe the West is manipulating this to push Russia's oil supplies and natural gas supplies out and create markets for the United States. I mean, there's some crazy conspiracy theories that are not looking at the footage of the actual suffering of the Ukrainian people. So I'm very, very glad that you mentioned this. And I wanted to pick up on something you said about acting in our vocations. So would you tell me a bit more about what you're seeing as people of faith are acting in their vocations in this crisis?
Well, I must mention that Ukrainians are very religious by, I mean, it's a very religious culture in a sense, not maybe institutionally, but all the polls show that the church in general, because we are a multi-faith community, we have different religions, and we do enjoy religious freedom in this country. That's one of the greatest differences against compared to Russia. No? Our history, we never had like one single church, and our church has never become a victim of a state apparatus. So never has a head of our church be blessing the war as it's doing now in all his videos, Patriarch Kirill, the head of the Russian church. So this is another thing. That's another thing that we were just talking about propaganda, but we're talking about the Christian church. And here's the Christian church leader, and he's saying that Russia has never attacked anybody. And it's just the video I was just watching a few minutes ago. And he's giving a blessing to do what? To kill the innocent. I mean, I saw them. To kill the innocent, to deprive people of their houses, like 5.5 million have already left the country, and like almost 8 million who are displaced on the territory of the country. Like somebody is doing this. No? So there was not even a word of compassion or sympathy from the Patriarch of Moscow, despite the fact that the cities that are completely destroyed, like Mariupol or Kharkiv, or 80% it was like Chernihiv, so that most believers most Christians who live in those cities, they consider themselves to be members of the Russian Orthodox Church. So not a word of sympathy in public, and not a word of admonishment to the Russian soldiers, like, okay, in case if we're talking about a special light military operation, so be careful, don't be over violent, don't do what you're not supposed to do, like robbing houses. That's just something that doesn't fit into my mind. You know, I'm religious. No? I'm a priest. I went through a long formation. I can understand how a person of faith can behave like this. But this is one. I'm just using this as an example of one position if we speak about faith. So faith can be used as propaganda as well. And that's another important thing to keep in mind nowadays in our world, in the contemporary world. That's an example. You can use faith as propaganda. Now, what's faith been doing? Like our religiosity in Ukraine, approximately the polls show that 70% of Ukrainians do consider the church to be the most trustful organization or institution in the country, once again, no matter which denomination. And it's a very active faith. Faith did play a very important role in helping people to organize themselves in times of crisis. Like, for example, the patriarchal cathedral of Ukrainian Catholic Church during the Revolution of Dignity, as we call it. So this was the place where people could stay, could sleep. I mean, in the basement, in every possible way where they could be fed. During the COVID, this was the place where people could vaccinate it or find a doctor or some other support. And now it's a place where people were hiding from bombs. I remember February 24th, and a month since then, when Kyiv was, when the Russians were on the suburbs of Kyiv, northern suburbs of Kyiv. So there's so many people living in the basement of the cathedral. But this is a very clear image. So this is the church, which has a very long-lasting spiritual tradition of staying with the people. So God is among us. God is in the midst of the city, and this is actually what the church is doing. It's realizing its vocation, but being close to the people in all that they have to go through, in all the sufferings. Like we as military chaplains, it's not only the military with whom we serve and whom we try to, whom we teach that humanity is our greatest treasure, that you are here to defend this treasure, God-given treasure, your capacity of being human, that you are not an instrument of political, I mean, for a person from the distance, as you mentioned, these stories are being seen through the prism of their own experience, of course. But if you come to Ukraine, if you lived here, if you knew our military, oh my goodness, it's like going for a treat. There's this living spirituality. There is a set of not some extraterrestrial values about which Patriarch Kirill likes to talk, never defined, but they say that we are united by some values. I never heard the definition, which values, because the nowadays situation shows that we're using completely different sets of values. What the Russian soldiers have done in the villages around Kyiv, the civilians murdered in Bucha, Irpin, Kharkiv, Mariupol. I mean, people dying of hunger. So you see the kids who are burying their, I mean, it's already on TV, but there are kids who are burying their mother next to the residential house because there is no other way to do it, because she died of hunger. Do you understand? I mean, and then there are Russians around. They are not letting humanitarian support in the city. I'm right now talking about the city of Mariupol. Come on, but it's our mission, the mission of the Christians to greet about. And it's not an abstract thing that there is a war, somebody's fighting somebody. No, I'm sorry, that's far away from the truth. The truth is there was a peaceful country up until February 24th. The Russian troops who started to bomb, shell, and never stopped for this whole period of time. There are people who are dying of hunger, of bullets, of wounds. They have no medicine, some of them have no water, and then there are real forces standing around and not letting this to happen, this healing to happen. So we, at times, faith must be this, I already mentioned about two positions. So the one that when faith becomes a propaganda tool, and that's a very dangerous phenomenon in our contemporary world. And the second one, when faith becomes a very healing tool because it heals the culture. It creates a certain type of relationships in the society which pulls us to help each other, which organizes us in front of the threats that we have to face these days. So that's a healing, I think, mission of our faith. And Ukraine is this actually the land where you can witness it, where you see this, how faith played this important role, not of divisions, no matter how much Russian propaganda would try, you'll never find this here in Ukraine. Faith in Ukraine heals and unites us. And no matter which Christian denomination or even which religion, we collaborate closely with Muslims, with Jewish communities. So we are all together. We are the people of Ukraine. We're the peaceful people. And the things that happen, once again, it's like a rebuke to the whole of humanity that sometimes maybe we shouldn't be interested in what's going on somewhere else. It's enough to take care of ourselves. So we all live in our own worlds. But as the reality shows, no, the truth is bigger. And to get to know the truth, to be set free, we need to get out of our own perception of this world to make things clear. This is black and this is white. This is good and this is bad. This is right and this is wrong. I mean, all these things. It's about, like, remember the verse from the Bible. So here are the two ways I'm giving you. So one way and the other one. One is of life. The other one is of death. You choose. And the tragedy in the human history becomes when people start calling the right wrong and the wrong right. That's when things become dangerous to a human life. So faith heals Ukrainians, but the danger is that it may become a propaganda tool in our world, and then we're all victims.
Now, Father Andriy, you brought up one of the most important things about religious freedom, and that is that a place where you see very low religious freedom is a place where there's an intertwining of church and state in a way where one church can use the power of the state to coerce people against their will about worship, about practice, about religious affiliation. It can block other faith movements from coming in. It doesn't see kind of loving competition between faith groups as appropriate. And so that's always a measure, whether it's in Iran or if it's in Afghanistan or in Russia, is this a role that the church should be playing by its value structure is it should be a limiting force and on the state. It should be an empowering force for people to do the things the state can't do in terms of charity and humanity. But in the case of Russia, just like you said, this intertwining relationship between the Kremlin and the church demonstrates just how bad the situation is in terms of thinking of a robust religious freedom. And then what a difference to see people of different faith traditions working side by side to serve their fellow man, to not ask a question, are you a Christian like me? Are you an atheist? Are you a Jew? But serving, and of course that love of neighbor, which is not only among people of faith, but it's a demonstration. People can't act, they can't act freely, they can't act on their religious impulses if the state is telling them what to do all the time, or it's intervening in all of those sectors. And let's face it, no government is powerful enough, righteous enough, or has the resources to do all the things that need to be done. So you've really laid out some very fascinating points there. Let me ask you, what have we missed? I mean, this is a very complicated situation. When you think about us watching in the US or Canada, Australia, France, the UK, what do you think that we need to know that we may be missing in this conflict?
I just want to go back to some of the issues that I already somehow touched upon briefly, but maybe just to give a broader vision of, you just mentioned about religious freedom. And when this period of our war of Russian aggression against Ukraine started, I was always, as I mentioned, thinking of how come a human being can be so violent. I'm talking once again about the Russian soldiers and about hundreds of examples of utter violence. So what's wrong? Because we use that Russia is a developed country, so that there is a culture of Dostoevsky, of Tolstoy, Turgenev, all this beautiful literature and classic. Well, how come it didn't work properly? How come? Because this is the vocation of a culture. It's actually to raise, to elaborate, to develop our humanity. You know? That's the purpose of culture. We're not animals. We're cultural beings. So, and how come it didn't work? And I was thinking about the results of a properly, you were already mentioning about the authoritarian regime. That's exactly what we can see here about the results of living in authoritarian society. What I mean, like in the authoritarian society, you never hear, if you go through songs that are being sung in Russia, through movies they watch, through sermons from even Patriarch Kirill, well, nobody speaks about a human person, about an individual. It's always about a big and potential, a big and powerful Russia. That's just the last sermon of Patriarch Kirill. It's about powerful Russia. So there's always this collective unity, and a human being disappears. What does this mean? Well, this means very simple. There's no award freedom. The culture doesn't teach them personal freedom. Personal freedom has, as a result, personal responsibility. If I am raised with the ideas that I am free, so I'm already taught the ways to use my freedom and the awareness that the use of my freedom bears certain consequences. You know? So I would ask myself, at this point, should I drop the bomb on the maternity hospital or should I not? Or that there will be results. Should I drop a bomb on the drama theater in Mariupol, where there are huge letters saying children seen from the height of the. I mean, if you were never raised in your culture, even in ecclesiastical culture, in your church, with the idea that you're a human person, and what constitutes your humanity and your personality is your personal freedom And the dignity as a result of use of this freedom, so freedom and dignity, then we are all in danger. The global community is in danger. Because what's important in the authoritarian society is not that much your personal freedom and dignity. You never hear about that. But the expectations of the authority from you. So if you want to get through, if you want to achieve something, if you want to be a good person, you have to adhere, to listen to the authorities' expectations. This becomes the moral criteria. If I have the order to drop the bomb, I may be a well-educated pilot, I wouldn't think about it. No matter what the children, okay, children, for me, it's important to do what's expected from me. So the authoritarian societies destroy, kill a human person. They speak and think about powerful Russias, about powerful states, but there's no room for a human being. And propaganda, of course, plays a significant role in creating such an environment, cultural environment. But we gotta be careful, like the global society, global community, because due to the development of the technologies that we have nowadays, we can create reality and then start to believe that this is reality, and becoming victims to this constructed reality. Once again, the Lord invites us to seek the truth. And this may be like the most important part of our Christian vocation in the contemporary world, to set ourselves on this journey to the truth. That's my vocation. I don't possess the truth. I'm a seeker of the truth. So this may set us free from not only lies and being victims to somebody's expectations, to somebody's policies, but being free means being human. That's exactly something that distinguishes me as a human person from a tree or from a stone. The stone is a stone because it's a stone. The tree is a tree because it's a tree. But for me to be a human, I must become myself daily by the choices I make, by the ways I exploit my freedom. So I become a person in this use of my freedom. And this is exactly something that's very, as this war shows, that even well-educated people coming from a great culture may become victims when they become citizens of an authoritarian state. When the state becomes powerful but inhumane. And when we talk about the reasons for this war, I usually say that everything that the Russians propose is just, they may think this is reason if they wish so, but it doesn't correspond to reality. And this is very simple to verify. Just come and see. Jesus says that's another important call to our vocations nowadays, to understand what's real. Come and see. Please come and see. Stay here. It's open. Ukraine was always opening all the ways to all the international observers on Donbass. Were always open. Russians didn't let them go there. So I mean, these things, they must bother us before we make our personal judgments. So the two ones that I already mentioned. So find out, get yourself to seek the truth, and then come and see the pain, come and see the wounds, come and see the pain. Once again, because here in Ukraine, I think it's not only human beings that suffer from this war, but humanity, our common humanity, global humanity, something that's being a victim and is bleeding. It's bleeding due to our misuse of all the capacities we have nowadays.
Wow, you've hit some very powerful points, including the way that authoritarian regimes breed authoritarian citizens. In other words, that callousness towards human life. It's interesting that the places that are most religiously repressive, but have a religious justification, like Iran, like Saudi Arabia, that's where the terrorists come from their own tradition, right? There's this lesson learned about that your fellow man is of less worth. It breeds authoritarian, and we're seeing that with these soldiers, these young Russian soldiers who don't have the value of human life, but their own life actually hasn't been valued in the culture, in this authoritarian culture as you're describing.
They're victims as well. That's important to keep in mind. I as priest, I I pity them because they're victims of the regime that they created by their choice, by their support as well.
And on the other end, about, as you're saying, acting human, becoming human, being human, it doesn't mean anything goes, right? There's these natural laws that are rooted in religion and morality. George Washington called them the indispensable supports for society. It's ordered liberty. You're free to choose, but it's just like gravity, right? You can go a lot of directions, but gravity nonetheless is a fundamental principle. And there are these moral principles that underscore what it means to be a human. There is right, there is wrong. And of course, one of the most important ways that we learn about that is the way that we have the truth, as you said, both today and in your Economist article, the truth of Jesus Christ. Very, very powerful. Well, Father Andriy, this has been a fantastic interview. I can tell you it's going to be of great use to people to understand this, but also to be exhorted by your testimony of Christian service and Christian humanity. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.